Coyote vs. Acme. In 2023, a finished, fully animated Looney Tunes movie was killed on purpose so a studio could write it off on its taxes, and this summer, it's finally reaching a theater near you. Coyote vs. Acme is a live-action animated legal comedy directed by Dave Green, starring Will Forte, John Cena, Lana Condor, and Tone Bell, in which Wile E. Coyote hires a billboard lawyer to sue the Acme Corporation for its endlessly faulty products. In November of 2023, Warner Bros. Discovery shelved the completed film to claim a tax write-off, which means the movie would never be seen, so the studio could deduct its cost. It was one of 3 finished films the studio buried this exact way, alongside Batgirl and Scoob: Holiday Haunt. After a wave of public backlash, Warner Bros. Reversed course and let the filmmakers shop the finished film to other distributors. Ketchup Entertainment acquired the rights in March of 2025, reportedly for around $50 million, and the film is now set for a United States theatrical release on August 28, 2026. The best part is how the marketing leans straight into the burial, using Acme as a not-so-subtle stand-in for Warner Brothers, with the slogan, "The movie Acme doesn't want you to see." This is the rare case where a buried film clawed all the way back to a real theatrical release, and it happened because fans and the press refused to let it disappear quietly. It's the most current, most recognizable version of the whole vault phenomenon, and it's the perfect place to start: Zack Snyder's Justice League. Fans spent 4 years chanting for a version of a movie the studio swore didn't exist in any finished form, and then the studio spent $70 million to prove them right. After Zack Snyder left Justice League in 2017 following a family tragedy, Joss Whedon reshot much of it, and Warner Bros. Released that theatrical version to a lukewarm response. The hashtag "Release the Snyder Cut" started that same year, sparked by a Change.org petition from a fan in Puerto Rico that gathered over 170,000 signatures. After years of the movement refusing to die, HBO Max and Warner Bros. Announced that Snyder's director's cut would finally premiere in 2021. The studio spent about $70 million finishing the visual effects, the score, and the editing, with brand new material shot in October of 2020. The result, Zack Snyder's Justice League, was a 4-hour cut that landed on HBO Max on March 18, 2021, and it drove a 64% jump in the app's downloads. This is the clearest proof that an organized fan movement can force a major studio to dig up a shelved cut, and it became the template for every release, the cut campaign that followed. The Interview. A comedy got yanked from every theater in America over a hacking threat, and then went back on sale a week later out of pure spite. The Interview, a 2014 Sony comedy about a bumbling plot to assassinate North Korea's leader, became a target after a massive hack of Sony Pictures. On December 16th, a group calling itself the Guardians of Peace threatened attacks on any theater showing it, and Sony pulled the December 25th release the very next day. Major chains including AMC, Regal, and Cinemark refused to screen it, and Sony announced there were no further release plans on any platform. Then Sony reversed course within days, putting the film in over 300 theaters and onto YouTube and other online platforms on December 25, 2014. It's the fastest burial and rescue on this whole list, a matter of days, and it turned a middling comedy into a free speech flashpoint. Snowpiercer. One of the most acclaimed movies of its year almost reached American audiences 20 minutes shorter, all because a distributor thought viewers were too dim for the real thing. Snowpiercer is Bong Joon-ho's 2013 dystopian thriller, his English-language debut, starring Chris Evans, Tilda Swinton, and John Hurt, aboard a train carrying the last survivors of a frozen Earth. Harvey Weinstein of The Weinstein Company, the film's United States distributor, wanted to cut roughly 20 minutes to sell it as a straightforward action movie instead of the character-driven drama Bong had made. But in test screenings, audiences scored Bong's original cut much higher than Weinstein's shortened version. A free Snowpiercer petition campaign demanded the director's cut, backed publicly by stars Tilda Swinton and John Hurt. In the end, Bong's uncut version won out, moving to the Radius label for a limited art house release in June of 2014, and strong reviews pushed the company to expand it into more theaters and onto digital platforms. It's the rescue by refusal story, where a director and his cast simply held the line and the original film survived intact. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I make videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would genuinely help the channel out. Thanks. The Other Side of the Wind. Orson Welles shot his big comeback film, then watched it get locked inside a vault by lawyers and a revolution, where it sat for over 40 years. The Other Side of the Wind is Welles's satirical drama about an aging director on his final night, starring John Huston, Peter Bogdanovich, and Oja Kodar. Welles began shooting in 1970 and filmed on and off until 1976, then kept editing it well into the 1980s. But the film got tangled in a knot of financial, legal, and political complications, including funding tied to the brother-in-law of the Shah of Iran, and when the Iranian Revolution hit, the assets were frozen. The negative ended up held in a Paris vault for decades, unfinished, while the movie earned the nickname the Holy Grail of cinema. Welles died in 1985, with the film still incomplete, and for a while, it looked like it would stay that way forever. Then, in 2014, a company called Royal Road acquired the rights, and Peter Bogdanovich, along with producer Frank Marshall, oversaw its completion. It premiered at the Venice Film Festival on August 31, 2018, then hit Netflix on November 2, 2018, a full 48 years after shooting began, and it landed with an 82% approval on Rotten Tomatoes. This is the literal vault story of the list, a near-finished masterpiece by one of cinema's giants, physically locked away by geopolitics and legal chaos, and its rescue decades later is the ultimate clawed-back-out payoff. Metropolis. For 80 years, a full quarter of the most influential science fiction film ever made was considered gone forever, until it turned up in a rusty film can on the other side of the world. Fritz Lang's Metropolis, released in 1927, was cut down heavily right after its premiere, and roughly a quarter of the film was believed lost for good. The recut American version replaced international prints only about 6 months after release, so the longer cut simply vanished from circulation. Then, in the spring of 2008, Paula Felix Didier, the director of a cinema museum in Buenos Aires, identified a 16mm negative that contained the near-complete film. That print traced back to an independent Argentine distributor who had bought a full-length copy in February of 1927, before the recut ever happened. The 2010 restoration, called The Complete Metropolis, added more than 25 minutes of rediscovered footage and brought back Gottfried Huppertz's original score. Metropolis is the granddaddy of the Lost and Found Rescue, a foundational sci-fi film pulled back to near completeness 8 decades later, all thanks to one museum can sitting quietly in Argentina. Manos, the Hands of Fate. Somebody bought a random storage locker in San Diego and accidentally rescued what a lot of people call the worst movie ever made. Manos, the Hands of Fate is a 1966 horror film cobbled together by a Texas fertilizer salesman, and it became famous decades later when it was mocked on Mystery Science Theater 3000 in 1993. In the summer of 2011, a film school graduate named Ben Solovade bought the contents of a San Diego storage space from a defunct distributor, and buried inside was an original Ektachrome work print. His Kickstarter campaign to restore the film raised about $48,000, nearly 5 times its goal. The high-definition restoration, pulled straight from the original reels, premiered on Blu-ray on October 13, 2015. It's proof that even a famously terrible movie can earn a loving, crowd-funded rescue. The Passion of Joan of Arc. A silent masterpiece was destroyed by fire, painstakingly rebuilt, and then destroyed by fire again, and its only surviving original cut spent decades in a closet at a psychiatric hospital. Carl Theodor Dreyer's The Passion of Joan of Arc, from 1928, is celebrated for its stark, unforgettable close-ups of its star, Renee Falconetti. A fire at the UFA studios in Berlin in December of 1928 destroyed the film's original negative. Dreyer then assembled a second version out of alternate takes, and in a cruel twist, that reconstruction was also destroyed, in a lab fire in 1929. For decades, the film was considered lost in its original form. Then, in 1981, a janitor found 3 film canisters in a closet at the Dikemark Psychiatric Hospital in Asker, Norway, still sealed in their 1928 packaging. Those canisters held Dreyer's original cut, made before any censorship, and they were sent off to the Norwegian Film Institute. 2 separate fires should have erased this film for good, yet its finest version survived by pure accident, in about the least likely place imaginable. The Wicker Man. Legend has it that the missing footage from a horror classic was literally buried under a British motorway. The Wicker Man, from 1973, is a British folk horror film starring Edward Woodward and Christopher Lee. Under pressure from executives, the film was cut down again and again, from a much longer version to roughly 87 minutes for its theatrical release. A long-running legend holds that the discarded negative was dumped as landfill and paved over beneath the M3 motorway. To rebuild it, Studio Canal ran a worldwide search, including a public appeal to fans, and eventually found a 35mm release print sitting in the Harvard Film Archive. That print was restored and scanned in 4K for the 2013 final cut. It's the most literal buried story on the list, and its rescue came down to a single surviving print in a university library. Napoleon. One historian spent his entire life chasing the scattered pieces of a silent epic that its own director had chopped into more than 20 different versions. Abel Gance's Napoleon, from 1927, was a groundbreaking silent epic, famous for a finale that played across 3 screens at once. Gance re-edited the film so many times that he left behind pure archival chaos, with as many as 22 versions in existence, and the negatives hopelessly mixed together. The English film historian Kevin Brownlow began reconstructing Napoleon in 1969, piecing it back together from fragments scattered all over the world. His first restored edition was unveiled in 1979, and a version re-edited with a new score by Carmine Coppola premiered at Radio City Music Hall in January of 1981. Brownlow just kept going, expanding the film as more footage surfaced, with a further edition screened in 2000. This is the rescue as a lifelong obsession, one man spending 50 years rebuilding a film from fragments that its own maker had scrambled. Dark Blood. River Phoenix died with one film almost finished, and for 19 years its director hid the footage to keep an insurance company from destroying it. Dark Blood is a thriller directed by George Sluizer, starring River Phoenix alongside Judy Davis and Jonathan Pryce. Production halted in 1993 when Phoenix died from a substance-related cardiac arrest, with more than 80% of the film already shot. In 1999, the insurance company that held the negative wanted to stop paying storage costs and considered simply destroying it. So Sluizer walked into the storage facility and physically carried the negative out to save it. He re-edited the surviving material and premiered the completed film at the Netherlands Film Festival on September 27, 2012, 19 years after it stopped shooting. It's essentially a director pulling off a heist of his own movie to keep it out of the incinerator. The Thief and the Cobbler. An animator poured 28 years into what was meant to be the greatest hand-drawn film ever made, and then it was ripped out of his hands and butchered. The Thief and the Cobbler was the lifelong passion project of Richard Williams, the animation genius behind the visuals of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Williams began the project back around 1964 and worked on it for roughly 28 years, always intending it to be his masterpiece. But when production ran wildly over budget and behind schedule, the film was seized in 1992 by Warner Brothers and a completion bond company. The raw materials were then resold to Miramax, and an animator named Fred Calvert recut the whole thing into a Disney-style musical, a job that took an extra 18 months. Along the way, many of Williams's removed scenes scattered into private hands. Then, in 2006, a filmmaker named Garrett Gilchrist created a non-profit fan restoration called The Recobbled Cut, stitching together Williams's work print with every other source he could find, helped by many of the original crew. It premiered at the Vancouver International Film Festival in 2012. The rescue here didn't come from a studio at all. It came from fans and former crew rebuilding a butchered masterpiece for free, purely out of devotion. A Trip to the Moon. The very first science fiction movie ever made had a secret color version, and for 90 years everyone believed it was gone, until it turned up as a single lump of rotted film that had fused into a solid brick. A Trip to the Moon, made by Georges Méliès in 1902, is widely considered the first science fiction film, forever burned into memory by the image of a rocket lodged in the eye of the man in the moon. Méliès actually hand-colored some prints, frame by painstaking frame, but for the longest time, no hand-colored copy was known to have survived. Then, in 1993, an anonymous donor handed the Filmoteca de Catalunya in Spain a collection of about 200 silent films, and tucked inside was a single hand-colored print of A Trip to the Moon. The flag being waved in the launch scene was even colored to resemble the Spanish flag, a clue that the print had been made for a Spanish exhibitor. There was just one problem. The print had decomposed into a rigid mass, and specialist labs flatly declared that restoration was impossible. But restorers Serge Bromberg and Eric Lang of Lobster Films refused to give up, slowly separating the fused frames and discovering that only the edges had actually congealed. A full restoration launched in 2010, backed by several film foundations, recreating the missing frames from a surviving black and white print held by the Méliès family. And the reborn color version premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2011. It's the oldest and most improbable rescue of them all, the color birth of science fiction cinema, pulled back from what looked like a hopeless brick of rot. And if Coyote vs. Acme clawing its way out of the vault this year proves anything, it's that the films still buried today, like Batgirl and Scoob: Holiday Haunt, might not be gone for good either. Because if there's one lesson in all of this, it's that no movie is ever truly lost forever. If this was your kind of video, consider subscribing so you don't miss whatever I dig up next. Thanks for watching.